Hi, I'm Randy,
I'm Melanie.
and I have Melanie here, and she has no idea why.
No, I do not.
Well, here's my thought. When we recorded the first episode of the Grawlix podcast and called it Origins, and you missed the first part, and so me and Jesse kind of talked about ourselves, and nobody's really got to know you. And me and Jesse are all over Twitter and Facebook. We're all over online, and you're a digital reclusive.
I have a Facebook account. I just only get on once every quarter year or something.
Yeah. Well, and your Facebook's like, I try to keep my Facebook to where it's more private,
Yeah.
less public, and I use Twitter for public things, so.
I just try not to post anything that's going to get me in too much trouble.
Yeah. This is wise. So what I thought is I'd just ask you some comic book type questions about your reading habits and what you like and all that.
Okay.
Does that sound good? Were you worried about whatever this was going to be?
A little.
You seemed worried. I didn't want to tell you because I wanted to just...
Surprise.
Yeah. Okay. How did you get into comic books?
With my boyfriend, Randall. He had some comic books when we started dating. And then, I don't really recall what exactly it was. Maybe it was the Batman movies. Got him all amped up again. And so he started buying more. And I was making fun of him. And then he's like, oh, you gotta read this or you gotta read that. And then I read a little bit and I was like, oh, it's okay. It's pretty good. And he's like, oh, let me find something you'll actually like. And then I read Sandman. And then that was it. I was done.
Okay. Well, you kind of influenced, you supported my getting back into comic books. Because we're going to see, I think it was the day we're going to go see Prometheus and something else. We were doing a double feature. And the comic shop's right over there. So we went over there and you're like, oh, you go ahead and get some comics. So
Yeah.
do you remember what the first comic book you read was?
I'm not positive.
Okay.
I don't think it was a comic. I think it might have been like a book, like The Long Halloween or something like that.
Okay. Your memory.
You should know.
I do know.
I have a horrible memory.
The first comic book that I recall you reading was probably one of the Doctor Who Star Trek Next Generation crossover.
Oh,
comics.
I did read those.
Yeah.
Maybe that was first.
Because those were the first ones I started buying. And I bought a bunch of Batman and stuff like that.
Maybe that is what sparked it then, the Doctor Who, because we like Doctor Who. And then they came out with the crossover, and I like Star Trek Next Generation. I don't think Randy necessarily was as into it as I was when I was young, but...
Yeah, not so much. I was more interested in the Doctor Who. And that crossover series, I seen the cover that had... It was like a split cover, and it had the Cybermen on one side and the Borg on the other. And I was like, of course. It works.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you kind of answered one of my other questions earlier. Sandman.
Yes.
So, was that the first time you read a comic and it was like, hey, there's substance?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I mean, the other ones are okay. They're pretty good. But that was like, no, this is like an intricate story about interesting things that interest me. And it helps that it was a finished series, so I read the whole thing. So for me, it was like reading a novel or maybe a couple novels. I don't know. I don't know what the equivalent would be. And plus, it was Gaiman, and I already love Gaiman, so...
So there was your in right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of the books you're reading now, I'll say the ongoing series, what's your current favorite that you're reading now? It doesn't necessarily have to be, because I know you're reading some older series too, so it doesn't necessarily have to be like what's coming out right this moment that you're reading, but...
I don't know if I can pick a favorite, but I'm really liking Saga a lot. It's great. And Revival is really good too.
You're reading a lot of the popular Image books, I think, right now.
Well, they're good.
Yeah, the Image is, and they're releasing good books, and those are good books.
And The Walking Dead also.
Do you prefer ongoing series or like a one and done complete graphic novel? Like something like the Batman series versus like you mentioned the Long Halloween and stuff like that.
No, you know what okay. I don't like having to wait to read what I want to read, but I would rather read it issue by, if it's done, I would rather read it issue by issue than in book form. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons for that is a lot of the time when I'm reading comics, it's just in my spare time, and I can like read one and be like, okay, I'm gonna stop here, because otherwise I'll just go forever. So it's good to have that, you know, okay, well, I read the first 3 issues and now I'm gonna take a break.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And also I think it kind of helps me keep track of what happens in the story and when. And if I'm like, oh, in this issue this happened, otherwise I'm like, I don't, because you know, we talked about it a minute ago, my memory's horrific. Mm-hmm. I'll be like, one of these times, well, you know, sometime in the book, in the beginning, when it's in the middle or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
But when I can be like, you know, that one issue where this happened.
Mm-hmm. So it's safe to say you prefer stories like, even though Sandman ties into the DC universe at times, mm-hmm. It's safe to say you prefer fantasy or horror type stories over superhero stories.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you'll read Batman.
Yeah, I like Batman. I like some Batman. Some of it's not so great.
Yeah, you read pretty much everything I read. And I'm mm-hmm. kind of impressed that you stick with it, because I know you're not a big fan of all of it.
Yeah. It's because, well, I mean, sometimes it's just not great, but that's kind of anything. Everything's got to have, especially when you're going issue by issue, got to have just some filler crap here mm-hmm. and there. But part of the reason that I think, besides the X-Men, I'm not really interested in getting into Marvel that much, well, maybe I should, but I'm not that interested in it, is because I want a character and a story. I don't want to have to be, like, trying to remember the dozens of people that jump in once in a while and don't freaking really interest me at all.
Yeah, you're not reading a lot of Marvel. You were reading, like, All New X-Men and Uncanny X-Men. Mm-hmm. Brian Michael Bendis runs of those, the mm-hmm. recent stuff. But you're not reading a lot of Marvel by virtue of you're not going to seek out superhero comics on your own, and mm-hmm. I'm not reading a lot of Marvel. So yeah. When it comes to superhero stuff, usually you'll read what I read. You're reading Hawkeye, though.
Yeah, but that seems less superhero and more...
That's kind of the take on Hawkeye.
Yeah. And which is why I think I like that one. Mm-hmm. And kind of Batman, too. It's regular people doing extraordinary, strange things. Not, oh, I'm an invincible super alien, or, you know, some... That doesn't make it... So, there's no challenge, you know, in those situations.
Yeah. So speaking of Batman, because mm-hmm. if it comes up, I'll always steer that way.
Right.
I know you have a hard time keeping the series separate, mm-hmm. but you're pretty much up to date on the current Batman, mm-hmm. Detective Comics, mm-hmm. which currently was doing the Icarus storyline with the... Okay. Mm-hmm. And Batman and Robin.
Yeah. Which
of those 3 titles do you prefer?
Currently?
Yeah.
Probably the Detective Comics.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is that because it's more grounded?
Possibly.
Because the current run, before the current creative team on Detective Comics, it was just kind of crazy, mm-hmm. usual crazy stuff. Mm-hmm. But the current run definitely makes it, I mean, you're essentially, there's crazy comic book stuff in it, but this last storyline dealt with street level crime and drugs and stuff. Mm-hmm. More of a detective aspect, so it seems more down to earth than in some of the other books where Batman's about to jump into a giant metal suit that's telepathically powered and go into another dimension and fight. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or there's some, and I don't even know, because I'm probably thinking of older stuff too. Some guy that can bring people from other dimensions to pull people through the floor. What the heck is that crap? And I thought he was dead.
Yeah, that's in Batman Eternal, I think, right now, which you're also reading. But you don't mind heavy fantasy elements and science fiction stuff. But when you sorry, go ahead. You were going to say something.
But there's a difference. Okay, like, Sandman is a fantasy book. It's the dream realm. But, one, it interacts with the real world. But it's a world set that way. It's not, this is the regular world, and then once in a while I'll do this weird crap that doesn't fit in mm-hmm. with any of the stuff I usually do, and that's what I don't like. I want consistency.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. So what would you say has been the favorite thing you've read? One of the favorite, or a couple, because I know it's hard to nail down one favorite.
Besides Sandman?
Okay, so Sandman, besides Sandman.
Saga of the Swamp Thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Which thank you, Randall, because I did not want to read that.
No, you did not want to read that.
He made me, and it was awesome. I've liked a lot of the stuff that we've had to read through the pull list.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I want to say it's my favorite.
Yeah.
It's all been very good and interesting, though.
Yeah, we haven't really gotten a bad thing out of the pull list in the podcast.
Right.
We haven't got a bad book. Mm-hmm. Since you are a fairly new reader, although in your short time reading, you've read probably I know you've read far more comics than I have. Mm-hmm. For a new reader, what would you suggest getting into? And, like, what's a good entry point into comics? Because something like Saga of the Swamp Thing is good, but there's like a visual language to comics, and in terms of like the language, Saga of the Swamp Thing is like advanced, linguistics because of the panel layout and stuff like that. So that might be a little more dense for a new reader who's not used to. And that's one thing I think not that you struggled with, but I was concerned with at first, because that was fairly early on that I had you read that. So it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to worry about panel layout, but like Saga of the Swamp Thing's kind of advanced reading, it seems like, in terms of if you're not used to comics. So
right, it was difficult to know that you're talking about. You're not talking about layout, because I'm talking about layout.
No, yeah, I am.
It was hard to know where I was supposed to be going, because it was a lot of the pages were really like fluid, and I'm like, okay, which direction am I supposed to be flowing here? Am I supposed to go straight across or down, or am I supposed to follow this flowery,
Yeah, it kind of has a language. Eventually you figure it out, and occasionally you'll still be like, any comic reader's still gonna be like confused a little bit as to where it goes.
So if I were talking to someone who wanted to start a comic and giving them advice,
who wanted to get into comics, what would be a good entry point, you think?
I'm not sure what you mean by entry point.
What would you suggest they read?
Oh, you're talking about readers. Okay.
Yeah.
It depends on who it is, really.
Especially since you're not wildly into superhero genre. Assume it's somebody who's also not into superheroes.
Probably The Walking Dead, because it's simple and straightforward and easy.
And also hardcore.
Yeah.
And brutal.
So hardcore.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the people that I'm close to would appreciate that also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are my kind of friends.
Yeah.
Although, can I add some crap?
Yeah, of course.
Or advice? Because initially I thought your question was, if someone were going to be writing a comic, what advice would I give them? And I actually do have some.
Okay.
There's things that I've read that it's good, and it's got good stories. But one of the issues that I have, the things that I complain about the most in comics is, you need to make your characters very defined. You need to make sure that I know this character is this character, and not one of the 3 other characters that are similar. Or similar looking, especially. Make sure you can tell them apart by how they look, and if not that, also their actions, and preferably both. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So that's definitely for writers and artists, because that's something recently, specifically, we've come across a couple books where, while the art might have been good, the characters weren't well enough defined. And it definitely caused confusion at times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. It's happened before too.
Yeah.
But yeah. That, and I read my comics on my phone. I've read a few actual comics, but for the most part I read my comics on my phone. I hate when they use like little tiny writing off in the corner that I can't see even when I zoom in. I hate it. And I understand it's for effect, but consider that people might be reading these on other devices and have trouble with that sometimes.
I think awareness of the digital medium for comics, I think that's definitely growing. Not to say I necessarily want everything that's going to be ultra tailored to digital. But I think that is something that is becoming more and more, like, taken into consideration, at least ideally. Because, yeah, people are reading it on phones, and really it's phones and, like, maybe slightly bigger, like, tablets.
Yeah.
Because digital comics are fairly popular. And it seems like the distributors of digital comics are opening up. Recently in the news, there's been a lot more, like, companies offering DRM free, digital rights managed free comics, which is something a lot of people had gripes about, because when you buy when you'd buy a comic from a company like Comixology, you're not actually buying the comic. You're leasing the right to read it, and if that company ever goes under, your comic collection's gone. And what recently they've opened, I know this is an aside, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Recently they've opened up the option to different publishers, if they want, they can offer DRM free backups so that you can download your comic and have it. And that makes so much more sense. Yeah, so I think that's only going to help the marketplace and the audience, which means more people are going to be reading digital, which means I think more creators will take that into consideration.
Yeah. Anything else?
I don't have any, because I definitely, I wanted to do get to know Melanie, because a lot of times, and especially since summer break is over, it's going to go back to that way. A lot of times me and Jesse will start the show, we'll ramble on for a bit and kind of just talk, and then you come in halfway and we can do our segments. Yeah. So I don't think the audience gets to know you all that as much as they hear us just kind of banter. So I just wanted to introduce them to you.
Since I took that new position, though, I'll be getting home earlier, most likely.
Oh, nice.
So I'll get to spend a little more time on it.
Awesome. Good, because I like having you there the whole show. It's fun. In fact, one of the most fun episodes, I think, was partially because you were there the whole time, so you got in on all the It's All Pizza segments, and
yeah,
you inspired the It's All Pizza and I Want a Sandwich segments. If you don't know what we're talking about, check out our podcast. It's the Grawlix podcast at grawlixpodcast.com. I always get into, hey, time to pimp something.
Yeah, no, it's funny.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Well, it's partially the joke.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to try to sell something, at least make it sound like you're trying to sell it.
Hey, baby, you heard my my portion of our pimping Axton's shirts, so.
Yeah. They liked that, by the way.
Did they?
Oh, yeah. Jesse said he laughed quite a bit, and Axton seemed to appreciate it. Axton Kaler.
Is it Kaler?
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm terrible with last names. I butcher it.
You do.
I know, I do. I've talked to him. I'm pretty sure he said his name on the podcast before, and I still butchered his name.
No, we should have listened to it to make sure.
I know, but I was, how I do. I was rushing.
Yeah. I want to do, this is not relevant again to what we're doing right now. I want to do some books sometimes, too.
Like books?
Yes.
Yeah?
I can do it on my own if you want. But I just want to, little short things that I can be like, read this, it's good.
Book recommendations? I would love that.
Because I've been reading comic books for a couple years. I've been reading books since I was like 13. And I've read a lot of them.
Yeah.
There was a point in time in my life when I was reading like a book a day sometimes. So,
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, and this is something we could include. It'd be like a mini podcast episode to go on YouTube. So basically, this fall, I would love to do that, and we could include it on the podcast episodes if you want, or it could go up on YouTube. Okay. Well, since the YouTube channel is caught up to our podcast episodes,
right?
Because before it was behind, so I'd post a new podcast every 2 weeks on the YouTube channel. Well, now we're caught up. So basically how it's going to go is the new podcast episode will come out the first Monday of each month. So then I will post the video version of the podcast episode the following typically it'll be about the first weekend of the month. If we keep doing Comics News Roundups, that's 2 weekends. That leaves a free spot. And maybe we cut Comics News Roundup down to 1 time a month. I don't know. It just depends. But we have open spots. And we're currently working on your anime review show. I'm
taking this thing over.
You are. That's okay. I like it.
I'm going to do anime. I'm going to do books.
I love to have you do book reviews. I want to do full page bleed out. And that'll be horror focused. And it won't always have to be this October. Okay, this October I want to do horror movie lists. Like horror movie recommendations and good Halloween viewing. But it won't always be that. Sometimes it'll be just like we can do a review of a horror movie, or we can read a horror comic or television, as the intro stated.
Yeah.
The main mediums, and then also other horror themed things. So that's 3 shows that we can alternate between whatever we're feeling, and the book review and the anime show. Those can all be you. I'll join you on the anime show for sure.
Yeah, for the ones that you watch.
Yeah. But, yeah, that's great. I love it.
Yeah.
Because I like the idea, because the Grawlix podcast, it's comic books and webcomics and geek and nerd culture, and that's where we open it up so that we can talk about other things in the podcast. And I like the idea of taking the YouTube channel as being kind of like, there we can do some kind of open it up even a little more and do some different things and talk more about anime or sci-fi books. And
these are things that it would be nice to talk about on the podcast, but I'm going to have a lot to say, and we have a limited amount of time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true. And I like the free-flowing podcast episodes, but there really is every episode, since we only are able to do monthly. Every episode we have, it's usually packed full of what we need to talk about, so we have to kind of keep on track.
Sometimes we even have to cut stuff out because we just don't have time.
Yeah. So yeah, the YouTube channel would be good for the extra I don't want to say just overflow, like it's going to get, the stuff that didn't make the podcast, but it'd be good for those things that we don't get to talk about in the podcast because there's not time. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Me too.
What do you think, YouTube? Would you like to... Well, it doesn't matter if you like it. We're doing it anyway.
Yeah. But you can give us suggestions, too, about it. If there's anything else that we should talk about. We might not know a lot about it, but we can always do some research. Not, it's not like I'm going to magically get into Dungeons and Dragons and have a lot to say about it or something like that. But,
If somebody asks about Dungeons and Dragons, don't worry. We've got that covered, too, because Jesse knows all about it.
Yeah. Well, I know, but I'm just saying, make some suggestions, and we'll look into some stuff. Listen to the podcast.
Grawlixpodcast.com. I'm also doing Doctor Who reviews after every episode, every week, of the new Doctor Who Series 8. That's in text form. That's right. You gotta read it. But I made it easy. I'm calling them minute reviews or minute reviews, because it's basically like you skip the review section and then just read the pros and cons bullet points at the end. That's kind of the concept. So I try not to ramble on too much so that they're short and to the point. And you don't have to agree with them, but that's kind of usually my thoughts on the episode. So check that out. The weekly comic book release lists. I hate saying that. Release lists.
Comic News Roundup.
Comic News Roundup.
And all the extra stuff we're going to be putting out there.
New videos every week.
Yeah.
Every week.
Every week.
Every week. We've got since the first video went up, we've had a new video every week.
And please make some recommendations. We need to know.
We want some input. Input. Follow us on Twitter at Grawlix Podcast. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/GrawlixPodcast. Pinterest. I have a Grawlix Podcast Pinterest thing set up, and I'm really enjoying it, and I can add you so that you don't even have to sign in. I can add you to the board so you can pin stuff right to it.
Sweet.
Yeah. And I've actually really been enjoying that. At first, I kind of threw it up there mainly so we could put our Comic-Con, our con-going pictures up, you know? But I'm actually really enjoying it. I've got a bunch of folders set up for a bunch of Doctor Who stuff. And it's really good for sharing cool artwork, but also, like, links. If you find a link and there's a, you know, you can, if there's a cool picture on the page, you can pin the picture, and it's a good way to share cool links to websites and stuff.
Oh.
So there's all kinds of, there's a folder for comic book history where I'll pin comic book covers to, like, milestone issues and stuff like that. Webcomics. I've got a folder for webcomics where I'll pin a webcomic. And then, of course, if you click that, it's got the link right to the page. Those are usually, I've got all of our webcomic recommendations we've done. I've got pinned in there. So follow us on Pinterest.
Yeah, I want to get into that. I didn't even know we had that.
It's fairly...
It evolves so quickly, I can't even keep up.
The magical things I do in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I know.
I'm a busy man.
I know it.
I do all kinds of things. I added Jesse to the boards too. I don't think he's newer to Pinterest than you and I. So I don't know that he uses it all that much, but he's on there. He pins some stuff. I figured Jesse'd be good too because he's much more tied into, like, the webcomics community and art community online than I am. With me, a lot of the stuff I'll throw on there, you'll get a lot of Doctor Who and Batman stuff.
Yeah.
And I've got folders for both those things.
Well, I'll get on there and I'll throw some stuff on there too.
I've got folders for cool fan art and just cool comic book art and geek art. Doesn't even have to be comic book stuff. Sci-fi stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pinterest. I've been meaning to tell you about that because I think it's cool.
It sounds awesome.
Click like if you made it this far. Because if you made it this far and you don't like it, I don't know what you're doing with your time. Was that a good?
I guess. I don't know.
Subscribe for more better videos.
Yep.
More and better.
The longer we do it, the better we are.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
No, I'm sorry. That was a little weird.
Yeah, well, it was... I don't have to censor it, I don't think.
No, but you... I don't know.
Maybe that's what we need. We need to amp up the sex appeal.
No, it makes me feel foolish.
Bye.
Goodbye. Batgirl. I don't like her. You know.
Yeah.
Although most of the Robins interest me, I'd kind of like to know a little bit more about them. Actually, I don't like... Dick Grayson can... You know... Yeah. I'm not worried about him, but the rest seem pretty cool.